AITA for ruining my best friend's wedding by revealing her secret affair with the best man right before the ceremony? So I know the title sounds dramatic, and honestly if I wasn't the one living it I'd probably think it was fake. I'm 27 and my former best friend Claire is 28, or I guess still my best friend if you ask her, because she's insisting this is all a misunderstanding. We've been friends since freshman year of college. We did dorm life together, bad hair choices together, all of it. When she got engaged last year she asked me to be her maid of honor and I cried in her kitchen because it felt like this full circle moment. Her now ex-fiancé, Mark, is 30, they've been together for 5 years. He's one of those quiet, solid guys who works as an electrical engineer and does dad jokes even though he doesn't have kids. The best man, Ethan, is 29 and has been Mark's best friend since high school. On paper it all looked like a Pinterest wedding board. Summer ceremony at a vineyard outside Sacramento, about 130 guests. Venue was something like 10,000 just for the space based on what she told me, plus catering, DJ. The works. The problem, and the reason I'm here, is that Claire has been having a secret affair with Ethan for almost 2 years, and I'm the one who told Mark about it, literally on the morning of the wedding, which detonated everything. I didn't always know the full timeline. At first it was just small things. About 2 years ago Claire started talking more about Ethan in this weirdly lit up way, like we'd be out for drinks and she'd bring up some story about him that sounded a little too fond for just my fiancé's buddy. I noticed she'd get extra dressed up when we were going to group hangs where he'd be there. New top, extra lipstick. She brushed it off as trying because she was in a style rut. I told myself I was reading into it. One night about 18 months ago, a bunch of us were at this bar downtown. Claire got tipsy, Ethan got tipsy, Mark was home with a migraine, it was me, them, and a couple of others. I went outside to take a call and when I came back I saw Claire and Ethan standing way closer than made sense in the corner by the bathrooms, his hand on her waist, her leaning into him. It could have been one of those drunk friend moments, but it didn't feel like that. When they saw me they jumped apart like teenagers caught by a parent. She laughed too loudly and said they were just joking about some stupid college story. I didn't confront her that night. I wish I had. Instead I pulled her aside the next day and said something like, "Look, I know you love Mark but that looked a little off." She swore nothing was going on, said she'd never crossed that line, that Ethan had been going through a breakup and they'd just been commiserating. I pushed once more and she got defensive, accused me of being judgy. So I dropped it because I didn't have actual proof and I didn't want to blow up her relationship over a gut feeling. Fast forward about 6 months and I got my proof in the most cliché way possible. Claire left her phone at my apartment after a wine night. She realized when she got home and texted me from Mark's phone asking me to keep it safe. She said she'd grab it the next day. I plugged it in so it wouldn't die. Screen lit up with a notification for me. My stomach clenched. I know I shouldn't have looked. I'm not going to pretend it was some noble accident. My curiosity, and that little knot in my gut, teamed up and I opened the messages. It wasn't just flirty texts, it was a whole second relationship. Messages about missing his bed, complaints about having to play fiancé at Mark's parents' house, photos of hotel beds, one where she joked about hoping housekeeping didn't recognize her from last time. There were references to specific nights I remembered, like "can't stop thinking about you after last Friday," which lined up with a night she'd told me she was crashing early with a migraine. There were I love yous, not just from Ethan but from her. Full paragraphs about how she felt torn and selfish and couldn't imagine giving either of them up. I sat there on my couch reading months and months of this with my heart pounding. I took screenshots of a few key parts, not all of it because I felt gross, but enough that I couldn't later talk myself into thinking I'd exaggerated. I didn't tell Mark, not then. I told Claire. The next day when she came to get her phone I told her we needed to talk. I admitted I'd seen the messages. She went pale and then angry. She said I'd violated her privacy. I said she'd violated her relationship. She cried, said it had started as an emotional thing, that she and Mark had been drifting and Ethan was there and one thing led to another, the greatest hits playlist of cheating excuses. I told her she couldn't marry Mark while this was happening, that she either needed to come clean and try to fix things, or end it with him and be with Ethan, or end it with both and go to therapy, anything but this limbo where she was using one as stability and one as excitement. She begged me not to say anything, said she was figuring it out and didn't want to blow up her whole life over a mistake. I said 2 years is not a mistake. That's a second relationship. She promised she'd end it with Ethan, swore on everything that she just needed time to do it gently because of the friend group. I wanted to believe her. I did. Weeks went by, then months. Things between her and Ethan were less obvious in front of me. They were more careful. No hand on the waist in public. If anything they acted a little too formal around each other. If I hadn't seen the messages I'd just think they were slightly awkward. Every few months I would ask Claire directly. She always had a line ready. "It's done. We're just friends now. I hardly see him outside group stuff." She looked me in the eye every time, and I let myself be convinced enough not to detonate the grenade. Then she got engaged. About 9 months ago, Mark proposed on a weekend trip to the coast. She called me from the hotel sobbing happy tears, sent me photos of the ring, said she was so sure now. This is where I'm supposed to be. I wanted to be happy for her, but there was this screaming voice in my head saying, how can you be sure when you haven't even told him what you've done? I asked, gently at first, then less gently, if she had told Mark any version of the truth or if she was really planning to marry him without ever acknowledging the affair. She said what was done and she didn't want to ruin everything over something she claimed was in the past. I almost walked away from the friendship then, but she asked me to be her maid of honor and I said yes because somewhere under the anger I still loved my friend, or at least the version of her I'd grown up with. I also think there was a part of me that wanted to stay close in case I needed to pull the emergency brake, which is exactly what ended up happening. Wedding planning was full tilt for months, venue booked, deposits paid, dress, bridesmaids, the whole machine. Ethan was of course the best man. Every time we did group stuff I watched them like a hawk. I never caught anything blatant but there were glitches. Once at the tasting she knew exactly how Ethan takes his coffee before he ordered. Tiny domestic detail she shouldn't have known that well. At the rehearsal dinner she touched his arm in this familiar way when she laughed, the kind of absent-minded touch you only do with someone whose body you know. Maybe I was hyper-focused, but it all stacked. The night before the wedding we stayed at a hotel near the venue, me, Claire, 2 other bridesmaids. We did the stereotypical face masks and champagne thing. Around midnight Claire and I ended up alone on the balcony. She was tipsy and sentimental. She said she couldn't believe how far we'd come since our dorm days. Then she said, and this is burned into my brain, thank you for keeping my secrets. I know I put you in a crap position but you're my ride or die. Something about that phrasing made me see red. I asked her point blank if things with Ethan were truly over. She dodged, said it's handled. I asked again. She admitted they'd hooked up a few times after the engagement but she'd cut it off for real 3 months ago. I told her that was disgusting. I said Mark was about to stand up in front of his entire family and promise her forever and she couldn't even give him basic honesty. She said if he knew it would destroy him and ruin everything. I said that might be his decision to make, not hers. She started crying, accused me of trying to ruin her wedding, said I was being self-righteous, said if I told him she'd never forgive me and I'd lose her and probably half our friend group. I went to bed sick to my stomach, slept maybe an hour total. Wedding morning, chaos as usual, hair and makeup, photographers, moms bustling around. Mark was getting ready in a room on the other side of the venue. Around 10:30 I went over there with a garment bag someone had forgotten. He was sitting on the edge of a chair in shirt sleeves looking nervous in that sweet way. He smiled when he saw me and said, how's she doing? I looked at him and I swear something in my brain clicked. I flashed forward to him finding out in 2 years, or 10, when they had kids and a mortgage, or from someone else, and I couldn't be the person who knew now and stayed silent. I asked if we could talk alone for a minute. He kicked his brother and Ethan out with some joke about not wanting them to see him cry. When the door closed I told him what I knew, not every graphic detail, but enough. I told him I'd seen messages, that the affair with Ethan had gone on for at least a year and a half before the engagement and hadn't fully stopped until a few months ago. I told him I had screenshots from before if he needed proof. My voice was shaking so hard I could barely get the words out. He went absolutely still, then asked me to repeat it, slower. I did. He asked if I was absolutely sure. I said I was, that I had confronted her then and again recently, that she had admitted it to me. He didn't yell. He didn't throw anything. He just went very quiet and thanked me for telling him. Then he asked me to send the screenshots to his phone. I did, hands sweating. He looked at them, nodded once, and said he needed a few minutes. I asked if he wanted me to get anyone. He said no, so I left the room and went back to the bridal side feeling like I was going to pass out. About 20 minutes later the planner came in looking like she'd seen a ghost and said we needed to pause the timeline. Then Mark's sister came in and pulled Claire's mom out into the hall. Voices started rising down the corridor. You could feel the mood shift from excited chaos to something tight and brittle. 10 minutes after that Mark's mom came into the bridal suite and very calmly told Claire the ceremony was off. That Mark had found out some things and wasn't going to go through with it. Claire looked straight at me and I couldn't hold her gaze. It turned into a full-blown scene. Claire demanded to see Mark. He refused. They ended up talking through a partially open door with his brother standing in it. She kept saying, we can talk about this later. Don't do this now. He apparently said there was nothing to talk about, that he wasn't going to marry someone who'd been sleeping with his best friend behind his back. I didn't hear all of it, but I heard enough through the thin venue walls. Ethan conveniently disappeared at some point into the parking lot, which tells you everything you need to know about his spine. Guests were already arriving, so they ended up doing this last-minute announcement that, due to unforeseen circumstances, the ceremony would not be taking place. People whispered, some left, some stayed for the open bar because that's how people cope. There were aunties crying, cousins gossiping, One of Claire's uncles tried to corner me and ask what happened, and I just said it was between them. I wasn't going to start narrating the affair at the hors d'oeuvres table. Later that night, after most people had cleared out, Claire cornered me in what was supposed to be the bridal suite and absolutely lost it. She screamed that I'd ruined her life, that if I cared about her at all I would have kept my mouth shut and let her deal with it later. She said I'd humiliated her in front of everyone she knows, that Mark would have never found out if I hadn't stirred the pot day of. She threw in that Ethan was nothing and I'd made it into something huge right before the biggest day of her life. I yelled back, I'm not going to pretend I was calm. I told her I'd given her over a year to fix it herself, that I had sat with her secret and watched her lie to his face over and over, that I wasn't going to watch her lock him into a marriage under false pretenses. She said everyone cheats in some way and I was naive. I said not everyone cheats with the best man and then expects the maid of honor to drag the lie down the aisle. We said some things we can't take back. Then her mom came in and told me to leave. Now half our friend group is split. Some think I did the right thing. Some think I should have either told him way earlier or shut up entirely. A few say the timing makes me the villain, that if I was going to tell him I should have done it months before so he could back out quietly without the spectacle. I can't argue with that part. I probably should have forced the issue sooner, but once it was the morning of and he asked, how's she doing? I just couldn't keep lying by omission. Claire has been texting me walls of messages alternating between begging me to apologize to her and threatening to tell my secrets, which is funny because my worst secret at this point is that I ate an entire pint of ice cream alone after all this went down. Mark sent me one message a week later thanking me again, saying he was devastated but glad he found out before signing papers and potentially having kids in the middle of that mess. He hasn't talked to Ethan since, as far as I know. My parents think I did the right thing but agree I should have spoken up earlier. My therapist, who has unfortunately gotten a crash course in wedding drama, says I was put in an impossible position and there was no scenario where everyone walked away unhurt, but there were scenarios where I kept my integrity or lost it. So here I am, with my integrity and no best friend. So Reddit, AITA for telling the groom about my best friend's affair with his best man on the morning of their wedding, knowing it would blow everything up. Update, 6 weeks later. I didn't expect so many people to respond to my original post and I definitely didn't expect the level of detail some of you wanted. Sorry it's taken a while to come back. The last month and a half have been a blur of fallout, awkward conversations, and a lot of quiet nights alone on my couch wondering if I did the least bad thing or if I just nuked everyone's lives in the loudest possible way. First big thing, Claire and I are not friends anymore. That probably won't surprise anyone. 2 days after the cancelled wedding she showed up at my apartment unannounced, banging on the door until my downstairs neighbor texted to ask if everything was okay. I let her in because we have history and part of me hoped she'd want to really talk. Instead she launched straight into blame. She said I'd sabotaged her out of jealousy, that I couldn't stand to see her get everything, meaning the house, the marriage, the Instagram photos. She said if I'd just stayed out of it she could have transitioned away from Ethan slowly and Mark never would have known. I told her again that I wasn't going to help her keep him in the dark. She said Mark was too soft to know the full truth and I should have protected him from it. That line honestly chilled me, like she saw honesty as something you shield people from. I asked her point blank if she understood that I'd spent over a year begging her to fix it privately and she'd chosen not to. If she really thought I was the problem here. She said yes, that I'd inserted myself into a situation that wasn't mine. I told her to leave and that I didn't want to see her again for a long time, if ever. She has since read a version of the story through parts of our friend group where I'm the meddling maid of honor who made drama at the altar. She conveniently leaves out the 2-year affair and the part where the best man is the affair partner. A few mutual friends believed her at first until Mark quietly shared some of the screenshots with them when they pushed him. I didn't ask him to do that, but I can't pretend I'm upset about it either. Once people saw her own words about missing Ethan in hotel rooms while Mark was home being boring, the narrative shifted fast. Mark and I have spoken a few times since the wedding day, always initiated by him. I'm very conscious of not wanting to slide into some emotional support role he leans on instead of a therapist. We met once for coffee at his request about 3 weeks after. He looked like someone had taken a vacuum to his insides. He told me he'd confronted Ethan directly a few days after the wedding. Ethan apparently tried to minimize it at first, said it was just physical and never meant to hurt him, then admitted he'd caught feelings. Mark told him to get out of his life and hasn't spoken to him since. He also said he was staying with his brother short-term, that he'd taken some time off work to deal with the mess, that his parents were devastated but supportive. There was talk of trying to get some of the wedding costs refunded but realistically most of the big vendors were non-refundable at that point. Venue, catering, photography, they were out something like $30,000 or $40,000 between both families, which is sickening but also not my lane. That's between them and Claire's family, not something I can fix. I apologized, not for telling him, but for not telling him sooner. I said I should have dragged it into the light months before instead of hoping she'd grow a conscience. He said he understood why I'd hesitated and that he didn't blame me for the timing. He said he would rather have found out that morning than 5 years into a marriage when there were kids and shared property and even more sunk costs. I don't know if that actually makes it better for him, but it did ease some of my guilt about the spectacle of it all. As for Ethan, I haven't seen him since the rehearsal dinner. He tried to message me once on Instagram with some long thing about how I'd misinterpreted the situation and how relationships are complicated. I didn't respond, just blocked him. My loyalty is not and never was to a guy willing to sleep with his best friend's fiancé for 2 years and then ghost the second things get hard. Socially, the group has definitely fractured. Some people went fully Team Claire and I don't expect to hear from them again. A couple of them sent me messages privately saying they knew she'd been teetering on an ethical cliff for a while and that they were relieved someone finally drew a hard line. One mutual friend admitted she'd caught Claire and Ethan kissing at a party months ago and had convinced herself it was a drunk one-off. Hearing that made me feel less crazy, like I hadn't been the only one seeing pieces. I've been seeing a therapist regularly through all of this, which I highly recommend if you ever find yourself in the middle of someone else's explosion. She pointed out something that hadn't fully clicked for me, that Claire had essentially drafted me into her lie by confiding in me and asking me to keep quiet, and that saying no to that enlistment was always going to cost me the relationship. There was no version where both my friendship with her and my sense of self stayed intact. That helped me stop doing the mental gymnastics of if I'd just phrased it differently on wedding morning or if I'd just waited an extra hour. I've also had to sit with my own part in the timing. A lot of commenters said and my therapist agreed that the one thing I did wrong was waiting as long as I did. I can see that now. I should have either gone to mark the moment I saw the messages or made it clear to Claire that my silence had an expiration date. Instead I let it drag because I didn't want to lose her. That's on me. I've had to accept that trying to avoid one kind of pain just stretched it out and made the eventual explosion. Messier. Right now Claire and Mark are not together. Obviously, I've heard through the grapevine that she's still seeing Ethan, which is wild to me because if your entire life just imploded over an affair you'd think you'd at least take a break from the affair partner. But maybe that's the only place she feels like she got what she chose. Her family is furious. Her mom called me once to half apologize and half beg me to help repair things. I told her as gently as I could that this is not something I can fix and that if anyone can help Claire at this point it's a professional, not the friend she called a traitor. As for me, I'm down one best friend, up one very complicated sense of moral clarity. My day-to-day life is mostly unchanged. Work, gym, trash TV. But there's this low-level grief I carry around. I lost not just the person she is now but the college kid I thought she was. The one I shared late-night pizza with and planned imaginary weddings with. Finding out someone you love is capable of this level of sustained dishonesty messes with your ability to trust your own instincts. I'm working on rebuilding that. I'm not going to be anyone's maid of honor for a while, though. My quota is filled for at least a decade. Final update, 9 months later. It's been 9 months since the non-wedding, enough time that the initial chaos has settled into something like a new normal. People have moved on with their lives. The group chat that used to be constant wedding talk is now mostly memes and updates about work and pets. Claire isn't in it anymore, neither is Ethan, which is probably for the best. Claire and I have not reconciled and I don't see that changing. She sent a long email about 4 months ago that was basically half apology, half justification. She said she was in a bad place when the affair started, that she felt trapped and wanted to feel desired, that Ethan made her feel alive. She acknowledged in one sentence that she'd put me in an impossible position, then spent 3 paragraphs talking about how humiliated she felt having the wedding called off in front of everyone. She ended with, "I hope you're happy with the role you chose to play in my story," which kind of tells you where her head still is. I wrote back a shorter reply. I said I was sorry she was hurting. I said I hoped one day she'd really understand that I wasn't the one who betrayed her relationship. That was all her. I told her I had loved her like a sister and that losing her felt like a death, but that I couldn't be close to someone who expected my loyalty to extend to covering for her harming other people. I wished her well genuinely, then muted the thread. I haven't heard from her since. Mark on the other hand seems to be slowly rebuilding. Last I heard he moved into a smaller apartment closer to his job. He started going back to his hobby rock climbing group. He even went on a couple of dates with someone his sister introduced him to. Nothing serious yet, but enough that he texted me once and said I laughed on a date and didn't immediately think about the wedding. So that's progress. I'm glad for him. We're not close friends but we're on decent terms. Occasional texts. Holiday group hangs where we end up at the same table but don't center our shared trauma as the main topic. Ethan moved to another city a few months after everything blew up. I only know because someone posted a goodbye drinks photo. I don't know if he and Claire are still together. I'm not sure I want to. I unfollowed both of them on everything, not out of spite, but because constantly seeing curated squares of their lives was not helping me move on. On my side, the biggest change has been how I handle secrets, especially the kind that involve other people's relationships. I have a hard and fast rule now. If you tell me something that could seriously harm someone else that they don't know, I will either insist you tell them yourself in a specific time frame or I won't hold that secret for you. I've already had one smaller scale version of that play out. A coworker confessed she'd been flirting heavily with a guy in our office despite having a boyfriend. She tried to frame it like a harmless crush. I shut that down and told her straight up that I wasn't going to be her audience if she crossed a line. If she did, I'd either disengage or tell her she needed to come clean. She rolled her eyes, but later she admitted backing off because I didn't want to turn into Claire. Her words. Emotionally, my ability to trust my own judgment is slowly coming back. For a while after the wedding I went through this phase of second-guessing everything, every hunch, every read on a person. Like if I could miss something this big for this long in someone I knew so well, what else was I wrong about? Therapy has helped a lot with that. My therapist keeps returning to this idea that someone else lying convincingly is not proof that I'm bad at reading people, it's proof that they were good at controlling what I saw, and that actually, the part of me that kept prodding Claire, that kept feeling unsettled, was my intuition trying to get my attention. Socially, my circle is a bit smaller but a lot more solid. A couple of acquaintances quietly upgraded themselves to real friends by the way they showed up for me during the fallout, checking in, inviting me out, not making everything about the drama. One of my friends who had initially sided with Claire came back around months later and apologized. She said she'd been projecting her own stuff and didn't want to believe someone in our group was capable of that level of betrayal. We're not as close as before but we're cordial. I'll take that. I haven't been to another wedding since and I won't lie, the thought still makes my stomach flip. I got invited to a cousin's ceremony and RSVP'd no with a gift and a sincere, I love you. I'll watch the video. I'm sure at some point I'll be able to sit through vows without my brain flashing back to a vineyard hallway with muffled shouting, but I'm not going to rush it to make anyone else comfortable. Am I glad I told Mark? Yes, even with everything that came after, even with the friendships that burned, I can live with myself. I can look in the mirror and know I didn't choose silence when I had clear evidence that someone I cared about was about to make a life-altering decision without information they deserved. Would I do it earlier next time? Absolutely. That's the main thing I'd change if I had a time machine. I would pull the fire alarm the moment I knew, not let it smolder for a year. If you're ever in a similar spot, sitting on a secret that is eating you alive because you know it could blow up a relationship, the only real advice I can offer from the other side is this: whatever you do, you will hurt someone. There is no painless path. The question is whether you can live with the version of yourself who stayed quiet, or the version who spoke up. For me, the silence would have rotted me from the inside out. Speaking up hurt like ripping off my own skin, but now, 9 months later, I can breathe, and that has to count for something.